our dreams, right? Does that sound familiar? Is that make America great again? Is that put America first? That is that concept of we need to worry about our trade issues. We need to worry about our thing. We need to put our ambitions above globalism, right? Above the concept of a we. And then you have the other side of the equation. And again, I'm not demonizing either side.
Right.
I'm saying that these are two sides that need to come together. And the other side says, well, what about the Syrian refugees? What about love? What about the concept of you're going to build a wall? Like, is that love? What about immigration? What about race? Where are we on the stance of love? Now, again, I want to put just as equal weight of aren't these two goods? Isn't what we call a BOFM.
Yeah, they're good on both sides. I mean, one can be motivated out of protection, and one can be motivated out of wisdom or budget.
Right.
The other one can be motivated about by loving and serving others and helping others. But they don't have to be so extreme. It could be work together.
Yeah, I mean, most people would look at that paradigm and say, well, obviously the people who love refugees are way more loving than the people who are trying to make America first. But I think we need to look at the flesh aspect, or the negative aspect of we're definitely playing into the negative aspect of putting America first right now, where that seems very us versus them. So that's the negative aspect of it. But there is a reality of we if our country collapses, then we cannot be the shining light to this world, right?
Exactly.
That maybe we've always aspired to be. And so maybe, taking on a whole lot of immigrants or taking on not building a wall is potentially risking that. I don't know. I'm not even going to try to answer those kind of questions. But I do think that there probably is a negative side to this kind of aspect of, love over here that seems very positive, right? From that standpoint. So there's positive and negatives on both sides. Us having a we is being able to pull those sides together and say that they're not mutually exclusive. Well, to me, I believe La La Land kind of said they were mutually exclusive.
Yeah, ambition or love.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, would you rather have a movie that preached ambition, or would you rather have a movie that preached love?
Yeah, I know. And see, that's why neither of those were my favorite. And that is part of it, is just the reconciliation piece for me. Like, I want hope and reconciliation, and I loved, I don't know, like we always think about the character, like who, what's the character that stands out that I want to be in each movie? Like, who do I want to be in Moonlight? I want to be the surrogate mom who, feeds and says, in my house, you don't hold your head down.
Yeah.
Like I loved her hand of kindness and making the bed for him and saying, you always have a place here. Mm-hmm. So I think for me as a Christian, that would be the person that I go, okay, I want to be that's a safe place for people. Mm-hmm. I want them to feel safe to come. I want them to feel safe to sit at my table and know they're loved, So it's, that's what's so great about film is that we can we do this all the time at work. We can hash out things that we see and love, and yet, see it totally different.
Yeah, because for me, within Moonlight, I really love the fact that this drug dealer actually humbled himself enough. Now, how realistic that is, I don't know.
Yeah.
But in the context of the story, he obviously had a heart for this boy who was being picked on, and decided to be a father figure for him, and was called into his own sin. Like the boy actually said,
yes.
Are you the one dealing drugs to my mom?
Oh.
And him having to own up to it. And I thought that was a very wonderful moment to say. It was sort of like Fences, the concept of the flawed father who we still have to honor the good side of him too. And I felt like, for me,
so true.
I actually liked that drug dealing
I loved him
surrogate
too.
father
Yeah.
from the standpoint of really taking the initiative with this boy and teaching him how to swim and, hanging out with him and really, owning the fact that, he needed a father figure, even though he was very flawed.
Yeah.
And then owning his own flawed in front of him, which happened in Hell or High Water. That happened
That's
with
true.
the Chris Pine character, where he kind of owned his sin and said, if you hear about stuff about me, it's true, and then you see that same thing with, I think that in Fences, that was one of the reasons that it kind of bothered me about Fences.
Yeah, because he stayed the same. He was still like, I'm not owning it.
I didn't feel like he owned his sin, and he didn't have the nurturing, father figure that you saw with Moonlight, but still, I think that it's so funny because I see that flawed character of the drug dealer in Moonlight as God too. I see him being that father figure, even though he's flawed. Obviously, God's not flawed that way.
Yeah.
But it almost presents us as his ambassadors, like
you can see the kindness, the care that he,
like I'm a flawed vessel of love.
Yeah, me too.
To other people, and even though I'm trying my best to be, God to people, or express the love of Christ to people, I'm still flawed. I'm still a drug dealer. I'm not a drug dealer, but I'm still a drug dealer. And when people call me on my own hypocrisy, I have to own it, and say, yeah, you're right. I'm a sinner too.
That was his pain, because in the one sense, he loved this little boy so much, and yet he was part of this boy's pain because he was selling his mom drugs. And yet the money, again, this is that what you talked about in La La Land, the ambition and love tension.
Yeah.
He wanted to love this boy, but he really wants the money he gets. And you see that wrestling, and we all have that. I mean, isn't there like something in all of our lives that we're just wrestling with? I want to love well, God. I want to, do these great things and do these wonderful things and love other people, but it's going to cost me. And what's that cost? And, and we wrestle. And I think it did a very good job of showing that. I think when you think about, too, even going back to Hidden Figures, that was, again, that side of kind of wrestling with, we want, people to come in and do these great things, but we're going to hold them down and not let them have our coffee, and they have to use a bathroom 40 minutes away, but we really want your expertise. And so it was just this place of shifting of, no, this is wrong. We can't compromise on one thing because we have to have it all. And I love that piece too.
Yeah, I think the curious thing for me moving forward, and it was almost answered in the commercial that I was speaking of, is what will this look like in mainstream? If we believe that the Oscars are leading the conversation.
Yeah, what's to come?
Then what kind of films will we see this year that reflect it? Or it may take a few years, but what films will reinforce this idea? And I think we're already starting to see that. I mean, it's so funny because in the commercials, there was 2 commercials playing by ABC. The first one was Time After Time, which was time travel.
Yes, that's true. I thought about your time travel. Right? Yes, and I thought I want to see that because it was fascinating.
So it played totally into our podcast.
It did.
Here's one commercial about, time travel in which we're dealing with the past and, how it's shaping the future because it's Jack the Ripper coming to the future and the present, I should say. And then we had this documentary I don't know if it's a documentary. I don't think it's a documentary. I think it's a series that they're doing on the journey of the gay rights and equality in our country. And so I thought, well, here's already, right after the Oscars, you're seeing a revisiting of the past, the whole time travel aspect of, playing with time and trying to drag the past up to the present, So I think it's already happening, ironically enough, even within the commercials for the Oscars that people are starting to replicate.
And even the Google commercial was all about, we still have it in us to unite. We still have it in us to unite each other. And like what we don't see, we get so upset about everything we're angry about, but we still have the ability to, to totally unite as well. Actually, the commercials, honestly, were better than the Super Bowl commercials. Like I told my husband, I was like, these are like, I mean, I'm crying in commercials in between, but just to see all those things come together, time, how do we find unity? How do we come together? How do we respect each other? How do we go on this journey of understanding stories as well and not be so afraid of everybody being so fearful? And so I'm not even going to take a chance to get to know you because, again, if you cannot have a conversation with someone and you cannot listen to someone, how on earth are you ever going to share God's love with them? Yeah, you can't. I mean, it's just...
you're right. It was so embedded in the commercials. And I believe there's a voice that represents the majority in this country of us screaming out, going, we want a we,
Yeah.
And I think the commercials were kind of saying that, like the one you were talking about with the Google commercial. I even thought that the LA Times, or was it New York Times? Sorry.
Yeah, the truth part.
Yeah, the truth part of it. I thought that they could have been real snarky about it, and they didn't.
I know. I was surprised with that
one. The truths that they were saying were on both sides of the equation.
I noticed that too.
And I went, they're trying to be a we in all this too, And I think that represents what is screaming out inside of us is we really do want it. It's just, like you said, it's so hard to figure out what is the path. And maybe a part of this path is really us, being willing to go back to the past and bring it up to the present, and just embracing that. Both
and isn't it
individually-
easy to love people that are just like you?
Yeah.
That feel just the way that you do about everything. But there's something about, like you talked about wrestling earlier, and the challenging pieces of wrestling, and kind of asking ourselves those deeper questions, is to extend that time to say, I want to know your story. I want to get to know you. It might make me uncomfortable. I may not like it. It may, cause stuff to well in me. But then we have that time to go back and say, okay, who do I want to be in the midst of this story? Because you're involved in your own story, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
And what legacy do you want to leave behind for our kids? Our kids are watching too, with how we do this, how we navigate. Give such an example.
That was the only thing that disappointed me about the ceremony is, I just, Hollywood already had every bit of red state America, probably not watching because they were expecting all the political rants and everything like that. And while it was toned down a little bit, I didn't think it was as bad as I thought. It could have been worse. I just felt like every time that either Jimmy Kimmel, would start the whole rant on something that would disparage the president, I just felt like you're kind of speaking out of two sides of your mouth, because on the one side they would talk about love and how love, and they would show something, a montage about how we get through this through love, and then yet, they're not realizing, or he wasn't realizing, I'll just put it on him, that some of those comments, you're just creating division in the next moment just by being so disparaging of a person who's now we have to accept as our president, and
it's a good point.
And I know that people are like, well, he's not my president and stuff like that, but I don't think we're ever going to become a we unless we figure out how to let that go and just be able to walk in. Now, again, I am just as vigilant as most people about going, I want to make sure that
be responsible.
We're watching this and everything. But at the same time, I do think there has to become a point in which just the disparaging nature of thing and sort of talking constantly, talking bad. And I know, again, a lot of this is driven by Trump doing stuff, calling Meryl Streep a hack and all that kind of. I mean, he's not helping at all either.
Right.
I just don't think that if you're going to be a part of the solution, is, we want to show montages about love and us all getting along, and yet at the same time
not be loving at the
same time.
Well, and I think it's interesting too, because one thing that I really did agree with Meryl Streep's speech early on was, I do agree that there is this art that allows you to be transported into a story to gain empathy and understanding. And I think when you marginalize everyone and make it the us and them, I mean, at the end of the day, don't you want people to watch these works so that they can gain empathy?
Yeah.
I mean, if you just shut everybody out, then who's watching your films? That's the other piece, is that at the end of the day, we want people to see films so we can see Florence Foster Jenkins and feel for her, and to learn about these characters and have empathy, because the truth is that, we only have one life, and we can't be we're not God. We can't be everybody and be in everyone's shoes.
Yeah.
But for me, Lion, I was transported to India, and I was able to just jump into that culture for a minute. And I haven't been to India, but I got a taste of that besides Epcot. I guess, just being able to leave and go to Epcot is probably like some of my only travel. But the idea that a lot of people will never get to experience certain things, so why not allow people to have that preview of this is what life is like for someone else, whether it's poverty or pain, whether it's joy or love. But to be able to have compassion grow is to be able to open that up to people.
Well, and I think this is the final thing maybe to talk about in all this is, sadly enough, Moonlight winning doesn't do anything more for the Oscars being irrelevant to most people, right? Because if La La Land had won, at least it was a box office hit. At least it was popular.
Most people saw it,
If Hidden Figures had won, it would be like, oh my goodness, this was totally, the Oscars allowing a box office hit to win. So it is kind of indicative of the Oscars to pick a film that nobody has seen,
right? That
then wins. You hope more people see it because of that. But like Spotlight last year, I wonder how much that really caused people to go see it versus
American
a movie
Sniper,
or Brooklyn was last year,
Brooklyn,
and it kind of emerged as a much more interesting picture for people to watch last year, at least in the people I was in circles with, we started to see more people putting Brooklyn on their top 10